It is with great pleasure that I now formally introduce to you this year's keynote speaker, Dean Ann Massey.
I think she thought I was going to run into that. Well, thank you all. This is truly an honor to have been invited to serve in this role, both as a dean and also as a keynote for this event. I had heard so much about this event a year ago and had the opportunity to have dinner with Diane Isenberg the night before she was a keynote address. So this is very fun for me. Now, let's see if I can get this remote working in the right way. When I was asked to do this a couple months ago, I thought, well, this sounds great. I'd be happy to do it. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, what do they want me to talk about? What are they really looking for? How can I maybe add some value to the morning and to what you're thinking and where you are in your careers going forward? So I spent a lot of time thinking about this, stewing about it, and talking with folks in the school. And what I did a couple weeks ago to help me kind of make some sense of this is I went to the Women of Isenberg, to your website, and I looked at the words that were on the site as to the benefits that you were trying to achieve as a result of this meeting, the conference this morning, and also the panels that are there. And these are many, many of the words, all driving towards your questions around how to be successful, I think. Successful in work, successful in life, successful in school. And all of these kinds of things that you're going to be talking about today and thinking about going forward, from mentorship to learning to momentum to relationships, all of those things, I thought, geez, maybe that's what they want me to talk about. They want me to reflect on my experience and try to draw some insights. So you forced me to be very reflective over my career, which was actually kind of fun. I'll come back to this, and we'll see as you think about this, maybe we have some times for questions a little bit later. But as I thought about this and thought, what really did I feel for me drove where I am today? Success in various different ways, accomplishments, whatever you want to put. And I really thought about, and I have a new book out, you may not have seen it yet, The Dean's Book of Ingredients. Right? It's, I'll have Lisa, you can order it from Amazon. But I really did think about this in very simple ways of what are the ingredients that I feel have really driven my career, right? Both personally and professionally. And I think, and I'm going to talk about these as we go forward and looking back over what I've done, is really knowing who you are. Really understanding who you are, where you came from, and what your values are, okay? So we'll talk more about that. And relationships, Lisa mentioned it, you've heard this, we've got some programs today about networking. But not just networking, I mean relationships, your personal relationships, as well as your professional relationships, and the relationships that you've developed in your time here at UMass and at Isenberg, okay? And also about making choices. Right? Life is really about making choices. Sometimes we make bad choices, right? But it really is about making choices and what informs your decision making, right? And as we heard a little bit earlier about opportunities, because you're going to have lots of opportunities in front of you. What are the choices that you're going to have to make? And then the last thing is about testing and learning. And people also say, learning from your failures, learning from success. What I'm saying to you is take some risks. Test something, try something. So we'll talk about this. So these are my kind of 4 ingredients. But let me tell you a little bit about my background. Some of you may know, I come from New York. I grew up in the Schenectady area. Let's see if I can get this working here. Here I am with my grandmother, right? I'm standing in front of her house. She's showing me her garden. I think I might have been digging a hole or something. But I grew up in the Schenectady area. I also spent time up on Lake Champlain, way up on the Canadian border. That's where my other grandmother and my dad were from. So I spent a lot of time there. My mother was a public high school teacher, so we spent our summers up on the lake. And I also, as I'll tell you, talk more about, I went to RPI, I went to Rensselaer Polytechnic in Troy. So like I think many of you, my world was kind of small, right? Geographically small. I kind of stayed in the region that I had grown up in. And I also got to spend, how many of you ski? Oh, of course, right? Well, I learned to ski in Western Massachusetts at Jiminy Peak. This is my illusion of how I ski, by the way, okay? But this is how I think I ski, okay? If you saw me ski, you'd know that's not true. But, you know, it was a really wonderful experience for me because when I grew up in Schenectady, I went to Catholic school from kindergarten through high school in a community of boys and girls and families that we all kind of made our way through that life. And I've got some pictures here. How many of you are from upstate New York? We got any upstate? You know Freihoffer's? There's Freihoffer's Bakery. So a little picture you see up there in the upper left corner is I appeared on the Freddie Freihoffer show in my early media years 3 times, right? It's actually, you can go and look at the archives. It was a local NBC TV station, and they supported Freihoffer's, and the kids would go and be on the show. I'm still friends with a number of the people in that picture, right? Those are some relationships that I started when I was 3, 4, 5 years old. In the lower left corner are some friends of mine from high school. That was our volleyball team. We were the worst volleyball team ever. We were terrible. But those are people that are still some of my very good friends, that we've watched our lives evolve, have families, children, and so this is what I'm saying to you. This is part of who I am, right? And my mom and dad and one of my cousins, my mom was one of 8 children, so I had a great opportunity with aunts and uncles and cousins and so on. But the person, I will tell you, that had the most influence on me was my mother. And here I am with my mother, and I'm looking a little skeptical in that picture. I'm not exactly sure why. But my mother had the most influence on me, I'm going to say, in my whole life. And I heard one of you say, as I walked out the door earlier, gee, I wish I'd have my mom come today. Always invite your mom, right? It's really a great thing, right, if you can. So when I think about my mom, and I was reflecting on some of the things that I thought were useful to me and maybe useful to you, kind of in addition to my ingredients and the knowing who I am, these were 3 things that my mother continually said to me from a very small age all the way till she passed away in 2004, was take advantage of your strengths, right? Know what your strengths are. What do you do well? What could you develop more in? Because when I was thinking about what I was going to do to go to college, in high school I'd actually been pretty good in math and science. But I also liked a lot of other things, and I really liked history and political science. I thought, I'm going to go and be a history major. And my mother didn't have any objection to history majors, and I think history is a great major. In fact, our older son is majoring in history now. But she said, you're actually really good in math and science. Maybe there's some other things that you could take advantage of, right? You can still do some things in history, but think about that. Take advantage of your strengths. What are you good at? She also said, and we heard this already this morning, follow the opportunity. Always follow the opportunity. It may take you far away from where you grew up. It may take you far away from your friends and your family, your current comfort zone, but follow the opportunity. And that's kind of hard, I think, sometimes. I know there's some moms out here and dads to tell your kids to follow the opportunity because they may go far away from you. But follow the opportunity. And my mother, as a public high school teacher, and she just believed that education was a key to everything. And she didn't mean just K through 12 or college or 4 years. She meant a lifelong of education that you always had to learn. And she would always say, be interested, be intellectually curious. She always said that. So you start to get these things. This is what really shaped me as I reflect on my life going forward and everything I did, was some of the things that I learned, but these 3 key things. She also said a lot of other things, which I won't share with you today. But as I got out of high school and decided what I was going to do next, I kind of took her advice, and I had the opportunity to go to Rensselaer Polytechnic in Troy. And here's a view of the campus today. It's right on the Hudson River. It's a lovely campus. But as you might imagine, this, I'm going to kind of date myself here. This is 1978. And RPI was founded in 1824 as the first engineering school in the United States. It was a long history. When I went to RPI in 1978, there were about 12% female students. 12%. Today it's about 34%, right? Predominantly engineering, STEM school. But there was 12%. So I was in a dorm, and there was 1 floor of women in the freshman dorm. So you got to make friends really quickly, right? So it was very interesting. But the other thing that was interesting to me that I will tell you is it was a new world for me. Even though it was only over in Troy. Remember, I had gone to Catholic school for 12 years. I'd been in a relatively small community. Now I'm at a university, and I'm meeting people from all over the place. I was stunned the first week. I met someone, and I still remember this, from Jackson, Mississippi. I thought, my God, Jackson, Mississippi. I've never met anybody from Mississippi, right? So you meet people as you've done here. But the thing that was most interesting to me, I also played on the basketball team. I want to point something out. This was the first group of really good friends, again, building off what I had done in high school and so on. Again, still friends with many of these people, watching their careers evolve. I will point out here that you might notice, I noticed this, that plaid pants and bell bottoms were apparently the rage this time. So there was a connection back to high school. But the one thing I will tell you, so I'm about 12% females. I did not have a female professor until the 2nd semester of my sophomore year. And that female professor, if we can get her up here, there she is, was Edith Lukens. I took Calculus 4. Did you hear that, ladies? Calculus 4. Not you guys, I know we complain about taking the 1 semester of calculus. I took 4 semesters of calculus. Edith Lukens was hired by RPI as a math professor, distinguished career in 1962. She was the first full professor, female professor at RPI. I was in awe of her. I walked in that first day and I was like, wow, who is this person? And it put in my head ideas that, wow, I can do some things. I can do some things that maybe I thought I couldn't do. She was phenomenal. She also fought against the notion that girls, because there was some reports out then, that girls couldn't do well in math. They didn't have the innate ability to do well in math. And she fought against that and did research saying, no, it's not about innate ability, it's that they're being discouraged from pursuing careers in STEM and so on. So she really was instrumental and she probably didn't even know it. The other person that became a mentor to me was Gene Simon, who was ultimately an associate dean of engineering. And he had won, like Edith Lukens, RPI's highest award for counseling and mentoring undergraduate students. And he kind of took me under his wing, and I was very interested in how things worked. I love, for some reason, manufacturing and how things work, and he was in industrial engineering, and we would go and visit manufacturing facilities, and I got very into elevators. If any of you want to know about elevators, I did some projects for Otis Elevators, so I'm still fascinated by elevators, so we'll have a different session on that. But this was, kind of where I started. And then when I came out of there with their encouragement and help, my first job was at the Knowles Atomic Power Lab, run by General Electric at that time, in the Capital Region. In fact, Dean Sanjay Raman, the new Dean of Engineering, he worked there also. So there's a lot of, sometimes you find people that you've connected with. When I went to work there, and the Knowles Atomic Power Lab, by the way, was all about building out our U.S. nuclear submarine force. And so I don't know whether I thought I was going to get a ride in a submarine or not, but I thought this was an interesting job, and I was a program planner. So I kept track of projects, the engineering projects, the manufacturing and engineering projects related to submarines. When I went to work at Capel, now mind you, I'd been at RPI's predominantly male environment. I go to work at Capel, it is a predominantly male environment. I was the program planner for teams of engineers that were all male. Mechanical engineers, nuclear, chemical engineers, it was a all male environment. But at that environment, when I was there was a plant manager, and I learned something. And again, you know, sometimes the person that you least expect to notice you notices you. Maybe it was because I was the only female in the room. But we had a meeting every 2 weeks. It was a plant meeting where the project leads would come in, and then I would be there with the schedules of how things were going. And when I first started, as some of you have probably seen, you might have a conference table, and everybody's sitting around the conference table, and then there's often chairs up against the wall that aren't at the table. So I would come in, I was pretty young, I sat in the chair against the wall. I did it the first time, I did it the second meeting. After the third meeting, the plant manager called me out after the meeting. He said, "Ann, I want to talk to you." I thought, oh my God, what did I do? He said, "Why are you sitting against the wall?" He said, "You sit at the table." He said, "You always sit at the table." He was the early Sheryl Sandberg. Right, some of you may have heard this. I learned that is to have a place at the table, is to always sit at the table. Don't be afraid to do it. I was a little intimidated, but it was one of the best things that anybody could have ever told me. I was there working, and the one thing, this is of choice. So I'm there, and this is my first job, and I'm there, and I'm doing a good job. This wasn't, you know, I figured it out. I enjoyed working with people. They were very supportive. But I started to realize, and you're going to realize this in some roles that you have, there wasn't any place for me to go. All right? I was doing what I could do with that job and with the credentials that I had at the time. There wasn't anything more for me to do. I could have been comfortable and just sat in the job and continued it. And the other thing I realized was that my role was basically to tell everybody they were late, right? You're late on the project, and I didn't have any authority to change anything. So I had to make a decision. What was I going to do? Was I just going to continue in this role, or was I going to do something else? I talked to the mentors that I had, Gene Simon at RPI and some other people, and they said, come back and do a master's degree. So I go back to RPI, I acquire some new mentors in addition to Dr. Simon. Al Wallace up there was my advisor. He's 85 years old. He is now, again, for the umpteenth time, a department chair at RPI. And he's phenomenal. He was a mentor for me, has been for almost 40 years. And Jorge Haddock is the president of the University of Puerto Rico now. Again, these were some mentors. I go back to a department in decision sciences and engineering systems. It's all male faculty. But they were starting to have more of a mix of female students. So I was starting to work with other female students, which was very eye-opening to me. But I'm doing work, and they helped me get a job with IBM. And I had been doing work in simulation modeling. And so IBM at the time, it's in the early mid-'80s, is getting into the PC market, or personal computers. For those students here, this is what they looked like back then, okay? All right. And so I make a move from upstate New York to Boca Raton, Florida. That was pretty big for me. I had never done anything like that. All right? And I didn't know anybody, but I go down there. It was the best thing I could have ever done, right, in terms of building confidence. Experiences lead to confidence, confidence leads to competence. Think about that. So this was part of what I was doing. I get down to Florida, and I am doing simulation modeling right? Building models of manufacturing lines. Remember, I loved manufacturing. So I am doing modeling of lines that existed for IBM and lines that didn't exist. So you're simulating something that doesn't exist. Those are the most fun. You couldn't be wrong. I was also working on teams which consisted of people from different areas. So I'm doing the modeling. We also had engineers on the team. We also had Harvard MBAs that were doing the return on investment analysis and so on. It was a great experience, right? It was a great experience. I had some wonderful people that were guiding me, and I actually loved Florida, right? So I told a few people a funny story when I got down there because I had to find a place to live. Sight unseen, I got a condo, and it was a little bit inland. And I get down there, and the first weekend I'm there, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go sit out by the pool. So I go out by the pool, and I look around. Everybody is like 65 and over. I had rented a condo in a retirement community. But I learned to play shuffleboard, and I learned to play golf. I took golfing lessons with 3 fellas that were older guys. They said, come on, Ann, come and play with us, and they were wonderful. So I learned to do some things. I was doing triathlons. You're going to be talking, I think, about work-life balance. So I was having a good time. But much like what had happened at GE, at Capel, I am faced with another choice, another career choice. Because at the time, some of you may have heard this, that IBM stood for I've been moved. And so I worked for them for a couple years, and they would often move people around, but not in the same role. They'd want you to do something else, and they're saying, well, we want to move you. Here's 3 or 4 different options, none of which were really that appealing to me. And I also thought, if I'm going to go back, and my mentors at RPI had encouraged me to think about getting a PhD, I thought this is the right time to do it. Right? That the stage of my life, how old I was, my family situation, whatever, it's the right time to do it. So I made the choice to leave the sunny shores of Florida, which I really enjoyed, and I went back up to RPI. Now I had looked at some other schools, but I was a little bit lazy, and I thought, well, I know my way around, I'll just go back there, right? But I actually had, as I said, some wonderful mentors that were really encouraging me to come back. Now, when I went back to RPI, I thought I was going to study simulation modeling, right? That's what I'd been doing for IBM, and I'd done all this stuff. I get up there, and I meet some new people, right? Bob O'Keefe over here and Martha Grabowski. Martha Grabowski, by the way, was the first female faculty member in that department that I was in. Martha was a graduate of the Merchant Marine Academy and did work on the Exxon Valdez oil spill. Phenomenal person. But I started working in a different space, and I said, I'm not going to do simulation modeling. I don't want to do this. I'm not going to spend my life doing this. I was very interested in technology, and I was interested in teams. And so working with Bob O'Keefe and Al Wallace, I started looking at the intersection of the behavioral aspects of people and teams adopting and using technology. In particular for collaboration, in particular for teams that worked across time and distance. So I worked with teams that were what we call virtual teams, right? They're in particular product development teams that they may be, some people may be in Asia, some are in North America, and some are in Europe. That's what I got really interested in. And I was interested in telecommunications and the use of networks and so on. And so this was a career shift for me in terms of my focus. As a result of this, when I finished my PhD, because I was in engineering systems, and it was kind of an intersection of business and engineering, I now had to make another choice. As an academic, was I going to go to a business school, which wasn't the first option, it wasn't like right there, or was I going to go to an engineering school, like in an engineering management or industrial engineering department like we have here at UMass? But this is about noticing opportunities. So it's 1991, and I got a little, let's see if we get this here, if you can see it. 1991, you guys were just a twinkle in your mother's eyes, right? The World Wide Web and the internet is just starting to come forward. That we're starting to see it as networks had been around, And I knew about networks, I understood that. But the World Wide Web and browsers and the use from a business perspective and reaching consumers, Amazon didn't exist, right? None of that existed. But 1991, this is an opportunity. So I see this, and I can do this. I can teach this. It was kind of related to my research, and business schools were starting to, how many OIM majors do we have in here, right? 1991, department didn't exist, right? But business schools are starting to see an opportunity in the IT, information technology, the systems area. So I decide that it meshed with in my youth when I was using the telephone, right? That's me, right? That I could work in this space, that I was going to take advantage of this disruptive technology. It was disruptive to business schools, it was disruptive to business, and I was going to do this. And so as a result of that, I made a decision to go to a business school, and my first opportunity was at Clarkson University in upstate New York. Clarkson, for those of you who don't know, is way up in Potsdam, New York. I called it Southern Canada, way north of Syracuse. But it was a great opportunity for me to develop my business school chops, right? To develop credentials in this space. After I was at Clarkson for a few years, and I worked with some researchers, had some colleagues there, I went on to NC State. I've spent some time at Wisconsin, and I've done some work in Europe and Helsinki and in Surrey, just outside of London. So I've been at a variety of different places, had a lot of different experiences. The woman's picture up here, and I hope to get her to come visit us here at Isenberg, is my colleague and research colleague and longtime friend that I met in 1995 at NC State, Missy Montoya. We have been research colleagues now for 25 years and friends. We only worked together 1 year. Everything else we've done has been at a distance. And we always say we get more done at a distance because when we're together we have too much fun. So, so that works out pretty well. But there's another example, and I've tried to highlight for you some mentors that I've had and colleagues. Mitzi has been a dean at a couple of schools. She's been a vice president. These are your go-to people. You're starting to build your go-to Rolodex, okay? I spent the bulk of my career, and I want to spend a little more time talking about IU, not to give them some press, but because I did spend over 20 years at IU, starting, at the Kelley School of Business. At the Kelley School of Business is where I had my first, not mentor, but my first, what I would call a sponsor. And I suspect you've heard the difference, and it's a big difference. So a mentor is somebody, as you know, that can help you, advise you, give you advice, as you're making decisions. A sponsor can make things happen for you. A sponsor is somebody that sees something in you and wants to give you the next opportunity to grow. My sponsor was the then Dean, Dan Dalton. And when I first went to Kelley, somehow or another I'd get with Dan, and he started to ask me to do things. Might have been because I was actually the only female in the information systems area. Once again, I was the only female. But it was also a great opportunity for the school. And I would always ask, can I do this? Can I build a communications lab? Can I have this? Can we do this with the students? I want to do things with telecommunications. And I would get Verizon and Sprint and all the AT&T, all the big companies involved with our students, preparing them for the industry. But Dan gave me opportunities in the school. And I would talk to him and seek his advice and seek his wisdom. And I encourage you to do that. Sit down and talk to people. And I would say to Dan, because he had played every administrative role in the school and he was now the dean, I said, what's the biggest words of advice you can give me if I go down and do administrative work and leadership in this space? He said, you need to develop a thick skin. You can't take things personally in these roles. You have to have a thick skin. And I know many of you will ultimately be managers and leaders in your organization. You have to have a thick skin. You can't take it all personally because it will just beat you up, okay? So he told me that. And I will say with Dan, I served as department chair and program chair. I did all sorts of things. Dan treated his people like pawns on a chessboard, and he would just move you around, giving you opportunities to develop your credentials. Those experiences that developed your confidence and your competence and put you in something new. And I will tell you that Dan was instrumental in Kelly. These are just some of the women that are part of my go-to gals. Heidi Kestner on the far left is the current dean of the Kelly School of Business. Heidi and I have been friends for over 20 years. Heidi was a department chair. Each of these women Dan put in as department chairs, program chairs. These are just a few of them. A sponsor. Find a sponsor. Find a sponsor. When I was in Kelly, and I played all sorts of roles, because I was also very nosy, and well, I call it nosy, some people call it intellectually curious, I was also interested, I felt I understood how the business school worked. What I wanted to understand was, how did the campus work? How did IU Bloomington work? And then ultimately, how did the IU Bloomington campus intersect with the 8 campuses of the system? Dan helped me get my first job down in the provost's office. And this is another sponsor I had, Tom Guerin. So I'm down in the provost's office, and now I'm interfacing with the whole campus, all the schools on campus. That was just such a learning experience for me. It was so much fun. And in that office, I ultimately had the opportunity to work for 2 female provosts at IU Bloomington. It was just a great experience. IU was very good to me, helped me develop, helped all these women develop. 2 sponsors, 2 important sponsors. The other thing that was mentioned earlier, and I want to spend a little time on this because it was so important, I think it is still important, was co-founding the Center of Excellence for Women in Technology at IU. And these 3 phenomenal women, we did it together. Maureen Biggers, Lori McRobbie, and Beth Paley. Out of different disciplines, not in business, they approached me and said, Ann, you know, you're in technology. How can we attract and retain women in technology fields? What I would say today is every field is technology, right? Every field is technology. We built out this center, started very small, and we sold it to the provost, and it became a campus center. Today, there are over 400 faculty, female faculty involved. 75 male ally faculty are involved, and over 2,200 students are involved in the center. They have their own building. I mean, it's really phenomenal. But many of our objectives are the same objectives that you have for the women in Isenberg, right? For the same thing that we're doing today. But again, part of my Rolodex, right? Go-to people. UMass Amherst. Lisa mentioned earlier, be revolutionary. I just want to say something. Some said, you know, I'm the first female dean of Isenberg. There's 18% of the business schools in AACSB have female deans. 18%, right? 1 in 5. It's ticking up. We'll see more as people move up in their careers. At UMass Amherst, these are all your female deans. 75% of the deans on this campus are female. In STEM areas, in business, health areas, you name it. That is revolutionary. That is something for us to be really proud of. It's really true. And these women are phenomenal. We meet all the time. There's 3 male deans. They're phenomenal too, don't get me wrong. But we meet all the time. And they are my go-to people, right? I've got a problem in the school or an idea or an issue. We come together and we meet and we talk. Go-to people. All right? Phenomenal. And a place at the table. We got 75% of the chairs at that table when we meet with the provost. So that's pretty cool. All right? So let me give you just a few takeaways from kind of my experience, and then we take a few questions. kind of integrating my new book with my mom's advice. Know who you are. Know what your values are. You're going to talk about non-negotiables today. Know what they are. All right? What is really important to you? When you look at an opportunity, does it mesh with what is valuable to you? Is it the right environment? And don't be afraid to walk away if it isn't. Relationships really matter. All those folks from my little Freddie Freihofer days to the women that I'm meeting here and the men that I'm meeting here, relationships really matter. Choices, it's about deciding what opportunities you want to go after. Right? Look at something. Is it a disruptive opportunity? Is it something you can take advantage of? Think of things as you're testing, right? But always learn. You might fail. And I like to, one of the things that the I'm empowered by statement that the team asked me to give, one of the things that empowers me is giving people the license to fail. If you give people the license to fail, they will take risks and they will try things. If you don't do that, they won't try things. So you have to do it yourself, and when you're in roles where you can give that to others, give them the license to fail. Take advantage of your strengths. Realize, though, that you have got to continue learning, right? To this day, I take courses, right? I don't need any more degrees. My dad, he told me that after the last one. He said, when are you going to get a job, right, that you're going to keep, right? But you do need to keep learning, and I think you all know that. And the last thing I want to say on this is something I added, leaders lead all the time. Dan Dalton told me that. And what I mean by that is you can't lead at work and garner the respect of your colleagues and go home and be a jerk. You lead all the time, right? People are watching you. Your colleagues are watching you. In our case, students are watching. Lead all the time. Just think of it that way. And do it at home, do it in your personal life, and do it at work, right? And the one thing I wanted to, this is something that I always keep in the back of my head, and we often talk about work-life balance. I know there's going to be talk of integration and stress management. If you can do this, you really can manage your stress. And this says, understand what matters, whether it's in work or your personal life, and the things that you can control. And there's a lot of things you can't control. But if you focus on the intersection of the two, life is going to be a lot easier for you. Work is going to be a lot easier for you. You're not going to be ruminating about things that you can't do anything about. Put this one in your back pocket. This is Lisa, Linda, everybody's heard me talk about this in the school, right? I'm working on them, right? And then the last thing that I call is life's must-haves. And I mean this. These are 3 things you must have to be successful, to be happy, to be fulfilled. You've got to have your go-to people. Some are in a professional context, your personal context. Here's my family up here, my wife and 2 boys. The boy in the front whose face is blacked out, he's going to be a freshman in Isenberg next fall. And so he'd like to be incognito. So that's why he's in, and he thinks, he fashions himself the photographer, so he's taken the picture there. So I won't mention his name anymore or have any pictures of him. But you've got to have your go-to people, and you need to be a go-to person. And when you get in a position where you can be a sponsor, you need to be a sponsor. Women have not always done that very well. Some of my best, the things that make me happiest, and I can go back through, people that I was when I was department chair that are now in leadership roles, that makes me happy. Seeing people progress, that is a sign of your success, and if you can sponsor people. And you need to have go-to places. For me, this is a picture of Lake Champlain looking towards Vermont. That is so soul renewing for me. It's a place that I can go and be quiet and think, and you have to have that. You have to let your mind be quiet. And then go-to things. Here I am, I've given up the skiing thing, now I'm pretending I can golf, right? So this, and the good thing about this picture is my shirt matched the roof on the hotel, so that was good. I highly doubt that I made the putt. So think about that. So thank you, and I'm going to put this back up because these, again, are the things that I saw that you were thinking about. And so hopefully I've touched on them. I'm happy to talk about I can talk about a lot of things. We probably need more sessions, but I'm going to close, but take any questions if we have a few minutes. I'm not the boss of this one, so. I think there's a present coming.
So due to time, we are not going to be taking questions for this, but if you did have a question and is going to be here throughout the day, we're so sorry about that. We are just running a little bit behind schedule.
It's the coat check. Thank you. All right, good.
Thank you so much to Dean Massey for your insight. It really was a great way to start the day.